chance to insult an atheist for only $2. Where do you get an opportunity like that on any day? Plus, our Get Out of Hell free card is available to you if you call in today at 441-3000, just in case we don't quite get everything right. So anyway, Ed Golly with you in the Tan Talk studio, along with Joe Reinhardt and Jim Peterson. And
Hello.
Jim, we have a guest coming in today, Jim Helton. Tell us a little bit about him, if you would. And if he doesn't call in, then we'll move on to something else.
Yes, we have a lot of other exciting topics and so forth, but we are rather looking forward to Jim Helton's participation. He is a national field organizer for the American Atheist Organization, and after attending the 2012 Reason Rally, which was a central feature of that particular year as far as the free thought community was concerned, he co-founded the Tri-State Freethinkers and was appointed American Atheist Kentucky State Director. And under his leadership, they adopted the Highways in Front of the Creation Museum program, the Ark Encounter, which was great fun, needless to say. It attracted considerable media attention, if you can imagine. That here they have this monstrous ark thing that was supposed to represent Noah and his adventures, and the atheists are taking care of the highway in front of it. That was fun.
Nice.
Yes. He played a key role in eliminating the Gideon Bible distributions in public schools, which they're never supposed to be allowed. I mean, public schools are public, and religions are not supposed to be interfering on them. Also, removing abstinence-only sex education. Of course, that's an ongoing struggle, as we all know. But
I understand the most stolen book in the world is
Gideon Bible. Yes, of course.
Of course, I've heard that that's the intention of those who place them. Is
well, they're not
you'll
stolen.
take
They're
them.
supposed to be
Yeah.
allowed to just take them.
Well, that sounds like a good excuse.
Don't for a second think that those things are actually free. The Gideons, well, they lean on the various hotel chains and such to make donations to their cause. So basically, the hotels are paying for the Gideons to put those Bibles there.
And guess who pays the hotels for the rooms?
Ultimately, we do. And keep in mind, Gideon was a great family man. He had 77 sons, each one by a different wife. Now that is a prodigious task.
Did you say how many sons?
77, each one by a different mother.
Wow. No wonder he
No wonder
is
we're
involved with hotel chains.
That's right. And we're teaching.
It's not surprising that you'd find him in a hotel room.
Wow.
Well, at any rate, I'll continue to give you a little bit of idea about what Jim Helton is all about if you want. But
Jim, he will be here in town in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
If anybody would care to
Yes,
actually
indeed.
meet him in person.
At the rate he's going, he may not be.
Yeah.
well, I mean, it's coming along slowly,
Well,
but
it
I'm
depends
sure
on
he's
people.
in the offing somewhere.
Maybe.
But he will be appearing at the North Tampa Public Library on January 19th at 11 o'clock. It'll be sponsored by the Tampa Humanist Association, also by the Coalition of Reason, and also by our own Atheists of Florida organization. And he'll be talking about new strategies for a bigger, more powerful free thought movement. And that's what we hope to get from him today, a little bit of a sample, and we'll see if he becomes available.
Well, let's talk about the need for a free thought organization. We've heard it so many times, haven't we, from some of the wittiest in society. What do you do at an atheist meeting? Sit around and not pray. Ah.
Well, that is kind of funny.
Well, actually, and that's true.
Not
We
hard
don't
to
pray,
please.
but we don't make a deal out of it. The point is, of course, is that we see this ceaseless and very well-funded effort in our nation to convince people that our country was founded entirely on Christianity, that all of our civil liberties, our civil rights, our system of government, our Republican form of democratically elected representative constitutional government came from us because of the Bible, and we know better. But when people are convinced of that, they can also be convinced that therefore the rules and guidelines set forth for how we should live in the Bible should be then accommodated. But we as atheists know better, right?
Well, I'm told that we have Jim Helton
Well,
out
let's
there
see.
on
It
the
might be a
line.
crank call.
Oh, well, yes.
But anyway,
It could
that's
be Jim Helton and a crank call.
That's the reason that we organize as atheists, is because if somebody doesn't speak out against that and set the record straight, it's easy for dupes to be duped into believing that we are supposed to be a theocracy, that that we should subscribe to religious ideologies, that we should not pay any attention to science.
And there's something wrong with us if we don't.
Mhm.
Exactly. Okay, Jim, are you on with us?
No,
Yes, I'm on.
Here we
Oh,
are on the
good,
Atheist
great.
Forum. You're on with
Welcome.
Ed, Joe, and another Jim. That would be your basic Jim Peterson.
It's a
And
jungle of Jims out
Thanks
there.
for calling in today.
Sorry, a few minutes late, but I appreciate you having me on.
David is on the phone as well.
What a bonus. All right, is that David Williamson?
David? Hello, are you there?
Hmm.
Jim,
Maybe
are you
not.
Or
there?
not.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
here.
Oh, good.
All right.
Everybody's happy.
Well, we've done a little introduction of who you are, so we can get right into the substance of the program today.
Yeah, we were just talking about having a great time also, considering your actions with the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter by having taking care of the highway in front of it. I thought that was a brilliant stroke of marketing genius, if I might say. So we're interested particularly in your experiences and what you think about the prospects of free thought, atheism, humanism, however it might be described, in this country, as more and more people seem to be jumping ship in terms of being non-believers or at least non-subscribers to most religions. What do you think?
I think we need to do a couple things. As the people are becoming more and more or less religious, we need to offer them a community. And that's the one thing I think the church has done well in the past that we as a community haven't. And what we're seeing is with groups just like yours in Florida, is we're providing people a sense of community where they can go to like-minded people. The other piece of this, though, is we need to make sure it's a well-balanced community. And that's kind of where our ACES program comes in, where there's activism, there's community service events, there's educational events, there's social events where people can hang out. And the activism piece is probably the one groups are doing the least around the country. And as the religious right, as people are becoming less religious, the religious right is attacking equal rights all the way across the board. So we need to make sure if religion is being used as an excuse to discriminate or passing policies that are discriminating against groups of people, that as atheists, free thought humanists, that we are there in that space, actually passing policy to prevent discrimination and not just play defense, but go on the offensive to make sure that we can stand up for equal rights when religion's used as an excuse to discriminate. And that's been my big initiative of rolling that out to the grassroots level where people can affect their current school boards, city councils, and depending on the state you live in, potentially even state legislation. We're actually passing policies, and it's exciting.
Doesn't look too promising here in Florida, I have to say. But
Well,
as
and
an
on the-
observer-
I'm doing it in Kentucky. I live in between the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter. And if
That
I can
sounds
do
tough.
this here where I live, I am confident you can do it in Florida. And at the state level, it may be challenging, but going to actual individual schools and to individual cities, these policies are popular. We can actually make change. I would challenge you, especially when I come out there later this month, that we can absolutely have a positive impact in those schools and cities.
Do you make appearances at the public schools? Do you have debates or address any classes or assemblies or anything of that nature?
So most of the work I do is behind the scenes. Like I will contact the administrator with them about the biggest issue we take on is sex education. Only 8 states require consent to be taught. Only 13 states require sex education to be medically and scientifically accurate. So if we care about women, if we care about the LGBT community, we care about discrimination, everything starts with sex ed. So
But
we're not doing
Jim,
that's what we're going after.
doesn't it end with the federal judiciary? because the federal courts can have jurisdiction over state issues, and the way we see the federal courts being packed with conservative judges, isn't the future looking a little bit more grim than optimistic for the issues that we care about?
Well, if you go after the policy the way we're going after it, this isn't a legal issue. So, for example, like, it is legal. Like, in my son's school, they told him condoms had a 35% failure rate not to use them. This is legal to do in almost every school in the country. To actually lie. Like, my son raised his hand and was like, hey, it's 2% if you teach us how to use them. But what we're doing is, while they're teaching this, the churches are coming into public schools and teaching this. This is legal. This isn't a legal lawsuit issue. But what we're going to the schools and saying is, hey, we want a medically and scientifically accurate sex ed. Like, who doesn't want that? 86% of parents want this. And we're getting this put in place, even though, yes, legally I acknowledge, and you can lie to my children, but please don't. Like, why? And it's a very reasonable, rational argument that's hard to argue against when you lay it out in this format. And we can pass that policy, so while the federal government may have horrible sex ed, while your state may have horrible sex ed, we can actually get good policies put in place if we do this properly.
It was Billy Graham's protesting of sex ed education in the high schools that got him public national recognition and probably catapulted him into the multi-million-dollar evangelist that he became. So it's definitely just like anti-communism is a path to the presidency, anti-sex ed is a path to success in the religious world.
And we're having success getting rid of that and putting policy in place to protect that it must be medically and scientifically accurate. You must address consent. It needs to be gender neutral. It must include sexual orientation and gender identity. This will help prevent bullying of our LGBTQ allies and friends. Like, these are things that need to be done. And we do this at the school level, and it's positive. Parents want this. We can get this done, and we've laid out a toolkit in the work how to go about doing this. In addition, we can go after cities and do city policies. Very similar. On issues where religion's attacking our rights, we can do this in a positive, equal rights format that we get people behind. And we did it in Paducah, Kentucky. We passed an ordinance that you couldn't discriminate against LGBTQ. I mean, that's coal country. Like, if we can do that in Paducah, it can be done anywhere.
How do we get a copy of your workbook?
Just ask, and I'll send it to you.
All right.
You can go to atheist.org, go under staff, and I'd be happy to send this out. We train it. We've been so successful at getting sex ed implemented into schools. We started, Planned Parenthood contracted with us in Ohio to train their people how to get this inputted in. We're not teaching the sex ed. Planned Parenthood's the best at that. But we are very successful with our strategy of how to actually get it taught into the schools.
Okay, well, we have a caller at 4413000. Jody, is it?
Yes, sir.
Thanks for calling. How can we help you?
Well, I actually have been trying to get hold of you guys for a minute now. I'm sorry I haven't been able to make it to any of your meetups. I actually I'd like to help, frankly.
Great.
I don't know if my story is any different than anybody else's, but I personally grew up in New England. My family wasn't religious at all. We just weren't. There's no Jesus in our house. People don't say things like, I don't know, God is watching you or whatever. My grandfather was a scientist. My mother she called herself an agnostic and grew up in the Unitarian Universalist Church. And, so I was pretty familiar with philosophical sort of ideas and always thought Christianity didn't make sense. But only recently have I really kind of been faced with a lot of very strange behaviors. And really started realizing there's something very sinister going on here.
Was that around?
Sorry, go ahead.
Was that around the time that you moved here?
Actually not really, but it's a funny thing. When I was around 20 years old, a guy came into the store that I worked in and said, "Have you found Jesus?" And I said, "I didn't know I was supposed to be looking for him." Which
We didn't know he was lost.
Yeah, you guys must know the Atheist experience, right?
Sure. Matt
So
Dillahunty and crowd.
Absolutely. Well, apparently YouTube was aware that I was an atheist before I was, because I was watching lots of stuff on. You can find old Bertrand Russell clips, and I'm
Sure.
a fan of James Randi, and apparently YouTube said, "Hey, you might like these guys." I said, "I do like these guys. They're just like me."
Do you
So,
have a, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I thought maybe you might have a question for Jim Helton, our caller, our guest for today. And
absolutely.
since you're interested in helping, maybe you can inquire about American Atheists or Atheists of Florida. If you had some suggestions, I'm sure he might like to hear those too. So if you had something you'd like to direct towards him,
Oh,
we can all
absolutely.
take part.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and that was why I called, because, I really had no idea that Christianity was like that. Being raised outside of the church, you just don't realize what they're doing to people. And, hearing people that are actually afraid of hell and things like that really bothers me.
Yes.
That's not right. You can't be doing that to little kids. That's not cool. And, in my school, there was no problem teaching Darwin or reading Inherit the Wind in English. It wasn't just science class, So I've been looking at what I can do to help. And frankly, I have no problem, donating to your cause or paying to be a member. But the thing is, I've actually, my entire career has been in animation, advertising, motion graphics. I work in television, and I design broadcast packages for TV shows.
Interesting.
So I got to be honest, the things I could do for you are worth so much more.
Yeah,
They really are.
American Atheist has their own television channel, the Atheist channel. So,
Do they? I
I'm
don't
sure
think I've come across it, but I'd love to help you plan events. I can
it needs
plan
more
events.
content.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, motion graphics, graphic design, even your website. And no offense, you guys, but I've seen your website. It needs an update, man. You need to. But I can do that for you. This is what I do. I shine things up. You know what I mean? I work in advertising, and honestly, when I read about things like apologetics, which I did not know even existed, that really pisses me off. It's deliberately manipulative, and it's so obvious they're not even doing a good job of it. I'm sorry. I'm very excited about this because it's just so wrong.
We don't want to give it on the air, but make sure we get your contact information.
Absolutely. So, like I said, I'm hoping to meet you guys. It looks like I found online you're going to be at Carrabba's in Tampa on Sunday.
Yes, and ma'am.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to come in and meet you guys. Like I said, anything I can do to help, and
Oh,
I'd
that'll be
really
fine.
like
Okay.
to
All right,
help.
well,
I
we look
can
forward
help
to
with-
seeing you on Sunday then. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 5 o'clock.
Absolutely. And as for
Mhm.
Jim, as far as Atheists of America on a national level, I would love to help you do what you're doing. I'd love to do events here in Tampa. I can get people there. I can get the word out, and I can get some slick advertising. I mean, it's not right that Scientologists have Hollywood production value and you guys don't. That just ain't right.
All right, well, I guess we can all fold up then, because it sounds like
Yeah.
she's got it together.
Yeah,
Okay, let's
one
go
thing
back
I
to
think,
music of your
that-
life.
yeah, go ahead, Jim.
The one thing I think American Atheist needs, along with the other groups, is because the boots on the ground activism piece is what most groups struggle with the most, is people willing to get involved in their school board, willing to get involved in their city councils, like to keep an eye on what's going on. And while
Yeah.
often atheists have been, is when we consider atheist activism or separation of religion and government, the first things that come to mind is lawsuits. And American Atheist
Yeah.
has been doing this for 50 years. And unfortunately, it'll probably be another 50 years. We still have to do this. But my challenge is to people, if we can go in there with positive policies and come in there as an ally, not as an adversary, we have politicians now in Kentucky, Ohio, and other states coming to us and saying, hey, would American Atheists like to, what policies would you like us to do? I'd be happy to propose them. Hey, we want to work with you. They have no problem when I walk in to that city building or state building, giving me a hug, shaking my hand, and saying, and consider me an ally and an asset to them, not this adversarial that we normally have with fighting with schools and fighting with cities. We need to change that relationship. So having people involved and showing a positive for atheism, positive for humanism is huge. And when there's problems, and identifying those problems, we can help you work through those issues. And if it comes to a lawsuit, we will obviously do that, but we hope that it does not. And oftentimes, we can find partners on things that we agree on, to do. So I think that is one thing we need the most. And I don't want to speak for, the other groups, the local groups, but often groups around the country need people willing to take up some of these issues and all politics is local. So,
Yeah.
you know, the issues going on in Florida might vary between what's going on in New England.
Well,
But,
thanks for
you know,
checking in, Jody. Good to hear from you. We hope to see you Sunday.
Please.
And
Don't miss us on
Yes,
Sunday.
and we particularly appreciate your expertise.
Ed here's
And,
buying the first round, so
Yes.
there's
Oh, well,
no excuse to not come at
coming for it.
this point.
Yeah, and that sounds great, you guys. Like I said, as far as the legal stuff and the things that are going on, I'm pretty clueless. I don't know where to look. You know, so if you guys
Well,
are
you'll
on
find
top
it
of that,
interesting.
yeah, if you're on top of that, then like I said, I can help you. I can do your website. I can host it for you. You don't need to pay for that stuff. You know what I mean?
Great.
So,
Excellent.
Well, thank you so
All
much.
right, you're in.
well, Jim, you know the big issue that we're hearing about now that the the House of Representatives has been reconvened is the issue of impeachment, and of course, you know, we hear even Democrats saying, no, we shouldn't try to do this. We hear other Democrats saying that's exactly what we're focused on. My concern about either impeachment or resignation is a Mike Pence presidency, because this guy is a total theocratist. Is that the word? He would
Theocrat.
want to theocrat, thanks, and
Either
would
one.
seek to turn this country into nothing short of a medievalist Dark Ages kingdom again, entirely ruled by the Bible instead of the Constitution. Do you have any concerns about that yourself?
have major concerns, but also we have to look at this. I want to look at this long term, okay? And this is where I'm going to sound like a broken record. If people want to come to power, you know, they start at the school board and city council level.
That's
So by us, this is what the religious right did. The LA Times reported the Christian right hijacked over 2,000 school boards overnight. And we need to be involved in making sure we have good people at this local level and getting our groups involved in local politics of policies. Now, we're a nonprofit, so we can't endorse candidates, but we can get people involved on issues that we care about. And if we do that, what do school boards particularly do? They run for city council. What do city council people do? Run for mayor or House of Representatives. What do House of Representatives do? Run for Senate. You see where I'm going with this? Like, you build your power to where people share our values, because you could make this argument at the national level. There's very few people that share our values. and we have a minority ruling, you know, almost like a theocracy.
Right.
So if we want to change that, it's not going to change overnight, but we have to put people in power that share our values, and we have to start it at a grassroots level in your cities.
You're right.
and your states.
It's a war of attrition.
And we've seen this, and we've seen it work, like because
David,
of the
on-
policies we're passing.
Okay, well, we're going to take just a moment, barely over 30 seconds, to tell our listeners about Atheists of Florida, which is a local activist atheist organization. When we come back, we're going to talk to David, who's calling in, and our guest is Jim Henson from American Atheist. Helton, sorry, on the Atheist Forum here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. We'll be right back.
Atheists of Florida is a nonprofit membership organization founded in 1992. For over 25 years, Atheists of Florida has brought atheists together to address state-church separation issues, provide legal assistance in cases of religious discrimination in employment or educational institutions, help atheists meet others who want to live their lives free of religion, and produce the Atheist Forum. For membership information, visit our website at atheistofflorida.com, where you'll find our newsletters, annual reports, statement of purpose, and information about meetings and events. That's atheistofflorida.com.
And we're here every Friday on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Ed Golly with Jim Peterson, and Joe Reinhardt has our quote for the week. Joe?
Again, from Stephen Wright. I'll be brief and to the point. His quote, "I'd kill for a Nobel Peace Prize."
Jim Helton, our guest from American Atheist, on the line with us. David from Orlando. David, hello. Talk to me, David.
The engineer is...
Yeah, he's out to lunch. Well, not there. Okay.
Hey, sorry guys.
Oh, here we are.
There he is.
There. Oh,
He's just
David's
playing,
out to
he's
lunch.
just trying to
Okay.
play games with us. That's all. That's all. Go ahead, Dave.
It's a Friday. It's a Friday. Give everybody a break. It's
Right.
Yeah,
good
but
for
it's
you guys.
early in the afternoon.
Yeah, that's right.
It's beer 30 somewhere. So I wanted to riff off of what Jim said. So we have a chapter of, an affiliate of American Atheists here in Central Florida called the Central Florida Free Thought Community. We're looking forward to being one of Jim's stops on his Florida tour. Hopefully there'll be a T-shirt. But we definitely agree with the idea that we need to make allies out of folks. And what we've done a lot of in Central Florida is make allies out of the clergy. I'm not sure that we've gotten to the point where they're preaching our message, but we certainly like those that support separation of church and state, and we're finding that there are some allies, even in some more fundamentalist organizations, because they're starting to realize that they're not always going to be in the majority, and they're realizing the definition of the word privilege, and it's starting to have an impact on folks who can see the future of where secularists are perhaps, before several of us on this call are dead and gone. We are in the majority in the country, and I think they want to be treated equally under the law versus treated like atheists, the way we are treated like Christians very often.
Having clergymen on our side has a multiplier effect that's just splendid. I mean, they go back to their various congregations and tell hundreds of people that would never hear us in a million years things that we agree with. That's a terrific tactic.
So we have the Central Florida Commission.
Oh.
Yeah, Jim, I was hoping to tell you about this when you come, but there's a Central Florida Commission on Religious Freedom that we're participating in. We have an annual event in February, and something on Religious Freedom Day, where we get together and talk about how religious freedom issues, interfaith religious freedom, not just Christian religious freedom, have an impact on everybody in the community.
It should also be mentioned that AOF has an outstanding proposal before the Hillsborough County Commission and some others regarding Religious Freedom Day, which is January 18th, I think it is. But at any rate, but at any rate, so we're trying to get them to act on that. So far, they have declined, but I think we have some good arguments where in the throes of presenting to them, and so we're hoping for a more positive result, considering that over 60% of the people residing in Hillsborough County, which is Tampa, the biggest city in the area, claim that they have no religious affiliation. And that might be a little exaggerated, I don't know, but even if it's 20% less than that, it's still awfully significant. So I think we have cause to be optimistic here that people generally are much more favorable to a more liberal interpretation of religious freedom than that of the right wing.
And wouldn't you think that people who make that claim may not necessarily be saying that they don't believe in a God or an afterlife or supreme being, just that they don't like the rules that have been laid down 1,500 years ago, because they are, after all, horrendously obsolete, and they want to make their own decisions about how they're going to live their life and not subscribe to these primitive rules and mythological concepts of how we should live and interact.
Absolutely, because having no religious affiliation doesn't mean all that much. I mean, means you don't go to a particular church. They may still have religious ideas. They're by no means all atheists.
But to those of us who live our lives free of religion, that's the obstacle that we see, is that religion is a control institution, trying to control our lives, what we can and can't do. And as Joe always says, if they can't convince us with their Bibles and their superstitions and their mythology, they want to impose it on us through the policeman.
That's why they're so fiercely competitive all the time.
Yes.
And David said something that I completely agree with on. We have to go outside of the atheist community with other organizations, even interfaith groups, and the impact it has. And I can tell you two quick stories of what I've seen us do that. When I start working with interfaith groups and we've seen pastors, preach, rabbis go up there and speak to crowds of thousands of people that we're a part of, they start using language that's much more inclusive. They say, I would like to thank all the people of faith and those with no faith that are here today. Without even us asking, just by us being present and a partner, they're acknowledging that, there's people with no faith in the crowd, which is amazing, for a priest to do this. And we've seen this repeatedly. We've seen city council do this. We've seen other state representatives do this. There was also in Cincinnati this huge interfaith thing, and it wasn't just Christians. They had, Hindus, Buddhists, they had Muslims, they all these different denominations for this big religious love fest type thing that they were doing. And I planned to kind of steer clear as far as I could. from it. But they called me because they wanted me, the atheist, to deliver the invocation to start off the ceremony.
That's
and the
great.
reason was, they figured, and the reason I was nominated by everybody was, they figured the atheist community was the only one that would do an invocation that included everybody.
And that's
and
true.
they were right. Like, and so we, so atheists led off and did the invocation to the big, interfaith thing that was super well received.
Historically, we have always been the advocates for religious freedom, real religious freedom, not just freedom for my religious group, but freedom for everyone, because religious freedom is anchored to the rights of the individual, not the rights of institutions.
Well, that's our point of view. It's, I think, an irony that many religions take the opposite tact, and that is that tolerance, I think it was Wesley said that tolerance was like crucifying Christ afresh every day, to respect
Yes.
other beliefs.
I think the more people we get to talk to, the more we realize that those opinions are limited to those with microphones yelling the loudest, and they're really not the majority of most religious people or most congregations. And it's easy to point at stereotypes of religion or stereotypes of atheism or stereotypes of Islam and win points from the folks that can agree with that. But just like everything else we do, we have to kind of check our preferences and our biases and realize that we're going to get more done when we build bigger tents and bigger coalitions. And while there's still a lot of things going wrong in religion, there's a lot of things that are going right, and the younger generation is kind of pointing to that with their, departure of the church or never even entering its doors, and unfortunately being apathetic to atheism as well as religion. But I think it bodes well for us, regardless.
Well, yeah, I think that most people are, I call them apatheists, but they're apathetic towards religion and or politics unless it directly affects them in some even serious or economic way. So unless they feel directly wronged or they've had some injustice imposed on them or they have some political problem, they're not going to get up off their chair and become activists. People tend to go out and vote when they're unhappy, not when they're happy with the government. Low turnout means that people are satisfied.
Absolutely. The same is true for vaccines. People don't know what that world was like because it's been so long since it's happened. They're apathetic to the idea and even think it's a dubious concept. Yeah.
Yeah, we seem to keep having to learn the same lessons over and over again. And the only cure for this is a knowledge of history. And the only cure for not having one is to have a good educational system that actually teaches history. And that puts it out in such a way that students are interested in it, and that's been a challenge, I think, for a good many school systems.
It particularly it's aggravating because history is fascinating. It ought not to be a challenge at all.
It is. It's a story of us. It's who we are.
Yeah, and people should be eager to learn about history, just like they're eager to learn about their ancestors or their heritage or various things that affect them. And certainly history affects them more so than they realize. And if you don't know history, then of course you're compelled to invent it.
And it tells you about yourself, how you came into being, why you have the habits, the outlooks, the ideas that you have, is because these things emerge from history and shape us in ways we don't even realize. And by studying history, we began to know not only about the external parts of ourselves, but the internal parts of ourselves. How we're put together.
I have a quick question for Jim Helton having to do with the Ark Museum. Is that place standing empty most of the time, or are they getting some halfway decent crowds? Most of what I've read about it was that it's not a museum, it's more like a mausoleum.
So let me ask you this. How much money do you think they generated in 2017?
I don't know, but Kentucky guaranteed $80 million in bonds. I know they did that, or more.
Here's the misconception. Most people think the Ark Encounter is going bankrupt and nobody's going. This is not true. It generated $67 million in 2017 alone.
Wow.
It is a cash cow. Here's where, though, so that's that. The second part is, though, Ken Ham's absolutely lied. Ken Ham was promising 2.5 million people. The first year it did less than 1 million. The next year he said he was going to double his attendance to 2 million. Again, it did less than 1 million. So Ken Ham lied about his projections. He's lied about his attendance. So the atheist community has been calling him out on such things because he's blatantly lying. Having that said, it's still generating
Money
$7
hand
million.
over fist, yeah.
Yeah,
And over-
5 million a
they got-
month?
Yeah, they got 18 million from the state over the next 10 years. They got over $200,000 in cash from the county. They sold 100 acres to them for $1. All employees in the entire county have to pay 2% of their paychecks go to pay back the Ark Encounter's junk bond loan.
Wow.
75% of the real estate tax doesn't go to the government. It goes to pay back the $60 million junk bond loan. Like, if you're single, you have to sign a vow of chastity saying you can't have sex till you're married and that you believe the earth is only 6,000 years old. Like, now the county and city were on the verge of bankruptcy. They're not receiving any benefits from this. They're actually on the verge of bankruptcy from this. So they're going broke. But the Ark itself is a cash cow doing extremely well. Even though Ken Ham's lying about his attendance numbers, it's still close to 1 million people.
Well, now, is there any truth to the assertion I've heard that the place has school buses lined up with kids being exposed to the Ark as a form of science education? Actually, it's pseudoscience, as we all know. But is that true, or is that
So
an exaggeration?
what we know to be true is schools have gone there. Ken Ham offered them $1 tickets. We have caught schools doing this, which is a violation of religion and government.
Yes, it is.
We've seen cities. Dan Phelps is probably the leader on this. He went through and scoured and found a ton of cities doing city-funded trips to the Ark Encounter. Now, Freedom from Religion Foundation, American Atheist, when we see these, we've been able to put a stop to them when we catch them ahead of time. But sometimes we don't catch it till after the fact because they are openly soliciting schools and cities to come to the Ark Encounter.
I think it was Bill Maher said that people leave the Ark Encounter thinking that the Flintstones is a documentary.
This is so problematic because Ken Ham wrote a letter to the state stating that they were a for-profit business, they can receive state money. At the same time, they wrote a letter to the city saying they're a church, they don't have to pay taxes.
This is reminiscent of the Holy Land experience here in the Orlando area. While we're certainly not Williamstown, Kentucky, and we have a very different kind of structure of theme parks here in Orlando, had that happened with people like Jim and the Tri-State Freethinkers paying attention and the ability to communicate and network and the national presence of kind of secularism and separation of church and state, had that happened in the same era, I think we'd see a somewhat of a different outcome and a lot more of an outcry. But we talk about the Holy Land experience because it's here. They've got a lot of loopholes that they built. Jeb Bush's administration in Florida did this, and it's really just another version of the Ark Park that happened before everybody was paying attention as they should be. Now, certainly some were.
They were in litigation with the county over taxes when the then state senator Daniel Webster, of all names, passed a special bill granting them tax exemption over the heads of the tax collectors of Orange County.
And all they have to do is open up for 1 day a year for free as part of the deal that makes that possible. And the county taxes, the property taxes are crazy high there, but they're not paying them, as far as I know.
Nobody should have to pay for somebody else's religion.
Yes.
And this is the one thing I think I took this to extreme with the Ark Encounter, but it goes to the point of we need to know what our target is and what our mission is. Like, there was many other people doing information about the Ark way before I came along and did a lot of the research. But the reason I got a lot of credit was because I was able to successfully change the story with the Tri-State Freethinkers. Is we weren't writing about it. There was plenty of atheist groups writing about the problems with the Ark, but the mainstream media wasn't covering it. Nobody cared. But when I dropped a 15-foot banner at their entrance gate and called it Genocide and Incest Park, I grabbed the world's attention. Like, I was doing Fox and Friends Live. It's in the Bill Nye the Science Guy film. There were 6 documentary film crews there. There was Overseas, Miami Herald, New York Times. The press goes on and on. You can't, and almost every press outlet that reported on the Ark talked about the problems of the Ark and our talking points. Like, my talking points weren't Genocide and Incest Park. It was the thing of all the intertwine between government and religion that I just ran through you. Those were my talking points. And those got hit everywhere across national media. And almost any article you see about the Ark now talks about the problem of separation of religion and government with the Ark. And we were able to successfully change that story. So, we need to look at those tactics. While, yes, my genocide and incest may be offensive, but that wasn't my talking point. It's what grabbed the press's attention, but it's not what I was telling people when I was doing my interviews.
Well,
There's a big lesson to be learned here about knowing that this is going on and activating on it. So what we benefit from in our organization, and I'm sure all local and national organizations do, is people paying attention and saying, hey, is that right? Or I know darn well that's not right, and we need to do something about it, and letting folks know and asking questions and getting involved and finding people like Jim, Atheists of Florida, and other groups who can say, let's do something. Let's put the resources like Jody, who called in a few minutes ago, to work and get something done about it, as opposed to just blogging, just getting on the TV. It takes more than that, but those things are all starters to the conversation. Getting the media attention and getting volunteers activated and just paying attention to what's going on in your local school is a great way to do that.
how is it any different for the city and state to step in and help to pay for the Ark Encounter when they're gladly pony up hundreds of millions of dollars to build a football stadium?
Good
The
question,
difference
Joe.
is the religious aspect of it. Like, so if you're a for-profit business, you can receive government money, aid, and tax rebates and all these things, but you have to promise not to discriminate. What the Ark Encounter did is, and if you're a religious organization, you can't receive these funds, but you are allowed to discriminate. By law, you, as a religious organization, you can discriminate. What the Ark did was they set up the entrance gate as a for-profit business so they could receive all the state and city money, and then they made the actual boat itself the nonprofit where they can discriminate. Like, any other state would not have allowed this. And actually, Kentucky denied them. Kentucky originally said, hey, we'll give you this $18 million, but you have to promise you won't discriminate. So Anderson, Genesis, and Ken Ham sued Kentucky for discriminating against their right to discriminate. I can't make this up.
No, I read it.
So
What happens is we had an election where Governor Bevin got elected, who's an evangelical creationist, and one of the lowest voter turnouts in Kentucky. He's the second most hated mayor in the country. And he was like, I love the Ark Encounter. He replaced the transportation cabinet overnight when nobody was looking. And they said, no, we're good with it. Don't worry about it. We like it. We're glad we live in a Christian state. Elections matter. That's how we ended
That's how
up there.
theocracy works. That's how theocracy works.
So you're saying that these evangelical groups, at least the ones involved with the Ark Encounter, very much favor discrimination as part of their ideology. Is that correct?
Absolutely. When you go to the Ark, they have all this anti-LGBTQ literature. They have a whole section on discrimination and why they should discriminate against the LGBTQ community. You know,
I see.
Catholics can't even work at the Ark. Jewish people can't. Obviously, atheists can't. I walked in the front door of the entrance gate to meet Bill Nye because he invited me there. And as soon as I took one step in the entrance gate, security was like, "Hi, Jim. How you doing?"
Just
So,
a little
it was
welcome.
it was quite an interesting. I had a nice personal tour guide my whole time there.
I understand that, I don't want to digress, but I understand that the Bible Museum in Washington, D.C. is enjoying quite a bit of traffic.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. But I don't think. But that was, from my understanding, was built with private funds.
They're the Koch brothers, I think.
Yeah, which is a entirely different thing. If you want to build a
No,
religious whatever on private property with private funds, knock yourself out. You know, I may disagree with the message, but I'm not going to be protesting it.
Right.
But when you're preaching a message of hate, discrimination, and you're doing it with government money, like, no, that is not okay. And it's anti-science. We're raising a bunch of illiterate children. Like, that's not okay.
Which brings us to the central point that would really be the giant step to cement church-state separation, and that is that churches and religion will pay taxes like any other business.
Yeah, that would be.
I don't know
great,
about that,
but
guys.
I'm tired of being forced to support these clowns. I am.
At the same time that the churches start having to pay taxes, so does American Atheists, so does Atheists of Florida. And I'm not prepared
I
for
would be
that.
okay.
What
I
I
am.
would like,
I'd love to pay taxes under those circumstances.
what I would like is I'd like to see a 990 on Joel Edwards' in ministry. I'd like to see Paula White here in Apopka, Florida. I'd like to see how much she's pulling in and how many people are making, $500,000 working for her.
It's not a crime to be gullible. If people want to throw their money out in the streets and set fire to it, that's up to them. But if they give it to somebody, some business or whatever, they ought to pay taxes on it just like anybody else. Paula White is no different than any other human being.
They use all the
But
same
David's
services
point-
that we do, the fire stations,
But
the
David's
roads.
point, though, is that nonprofits and religion are not treated the same. Like we just want to be treated the same. Either nobody has to report or everybody does. Even in the nonprofit world, even if they're not paying taxes. Like if you give American Atheist $10,000 and say I have to report that, you cannot be anonymous. But if you want to give a church $10 million, you can be anonymous where no one cares where the money came from. Like they don't have to report any of it. Well, American Atheist has to report all of everything. We're very open on what's going on. So we just want churches and nonprofits to be treated equally.
I throw these numbers out frequently, but according to the Christian Encyclopedia, there are 10,000 different religions and 35,000 different Christian denominations, all of them sucking at the public trough to the expense of everyone else. It simply is a theft on a biblical scale.
And all of them telling us they're the one true religion. They got it
Well,
right.
there's probably a 1% number there somewhere that includes those that we hear about all the time, the Creflo Dollar and all those others. They're the 1%ers of the churches that are probably taking in a large majority of the money and doing the least good.
And have any of them ever explained why it is that God needs money?
Or why they need a
I think-
cathedral to preach a religion that is about poverty.
Oh, look to the comedians for the
private
answers to these questions.
Thank you.
Sometimes they are the sources of real wisdom.
So what all are the cities that are going to be on your Florida tour T-shirt, Jim?
Yeah, so let me pull up that list. So I start in Miami on the 15th, and I hit a different city every day. So I go Miami, Fort Lauderdale on the 16th, Fort Myers on the 17th, Sarasota on the 18th, Tampa Bay on the 19th, Orlando on the 20th, Jacksonville on the 21st, Tallahassee the 22nd, and Pensacola on the 23rd.
You're a well-traveled guy.
Don't bother stopping in Panama City. By the
Yeah,
way,
right.
there's nothing there. Okay. Just some friendly advice. All right, we've got about 5 minutes left, so would you like to tell us our listeners, that is, anything about American Atheists or some of your other projects that you're involved in? Just anything you'd like
Sure.
to talk about?
I'll plug two other things and then tell you one other project I'm working on. If you want to get involved in the ARC protest, July 7th in Kentucky, you should come.
Really?
It'll be on a Sunday. We'll end up making a weekend. We protest. It's an annual event. We do it every year. Some of the biggest names in atheism come. We've had Aaron Ross, Seth Andrews, Hemet Mehta, the Secular Coalition for America, American Atheist, Freedom from Religion, Dan Barker. It's the who's who has been there. We're going to have some big names coming up for 2019 as well that we'll be announcing soon. So July 7th, come to that. Also, the American Atheist Convention is coming Easter weekend. That's the 18th to 21st in Cincinnati, Ohio, in my backyard. I hope people can come out for that. It will be a very different convention in the fact that there'll be a lot of training and support around the issues that we're passionate about in policy. So not only we have a great lineup of speakers, it'll actually be, activist-oriented with workshops that we can do.
Okay, and that's American Atheists. If any of
American
our
Atheists.
listeners want to find you on the internet, they just go to the American Atheist website. Right? Tells you everything.
And then my very last thing is, American Atheist has dedicated a lot of resources in helping local groups just like yours, like David, we want to help you do the things that matter to you, that are important to you in your area, and go after policies, go after separation of religion and government. And we've put a lot of time, a lot of resources, and help and dedicated staff to help groups, be a powerhouse in their community. And we've laid out a blueprint with a lot of resources available to do that. So when I come to Florida, it's not just to speak and entertain people. I'm really hoping to get these groups engaged on, if you're not happy in the current political environment, what are you going to do about it is my question. And we want to provide people something that they can do about it at a local level and things they can have an impact on.
Sounds great. Listen, I should point out, you mentioned Hemet Mehta as being a speaker. We're also going to have him here in the Tampa Bay area on Saturday, March 16th on behalf of Darwin Day. He'll be a principal speaker. He's a great mathematician, and beyond that, of course, he is also the author of more than a few books, one of which is I Sold My Soul on eBay. And so he promises to be an interesting and exciting speaker and a humorous one. And we invite everybody to check out the Coalition for Reason website to find out more about it.
Very good. Okay, so David, thanks for checking in with us from the Orlando area. Again, our guest today, Jim Helton, who's the National Field Organization for American Atheists Incorporated. They're in, what, Parsippany, New Jersey?
Cranford, New Jersey.
Cranford,
is
New
where our
Jersey,
home office
okay.
is located. I'm actually in Kentucky, but our home office is in Cranford, New Jersey.
Right, okay.
And we should mention also that our colleague David Williamson is doing outstanding work for the Central Florida Free Thought community, and we're all moving forward.
And of course, our local organization, Atheists of Florida, here in the Tampa Bay area, where atheists can meet other atheists and be around like-minded people, which seems to be what they're always looking for. And our site is Atheists of Florida, where you can see archives of this program and join us for social events if you just want to learn more about atheism, or why we are atheists, why you might be an atheist, and why we consider atheism the superior lifestyle. Thanks again, Jim, and we'll see you soon.
Been great talking
Look
to
forward
you.
to it.
Okay, man.
It should be mentioned also that you can find us on at aof.ngo on the web, where you can find all that great stuff that
And on
Ed is talking
YouTube.
about. On YouTube, yeah, terrific.
Please view, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We can use all of the attention that we can possibly get. And don't forget, we are always willing to accept donations.
That's right.
Try and stop us.
We have no pride. We're shameless in that respect.
Shameless
Every
commercial.
Friday here on the Tan Talk Radio Network, it's the Atheist Forum, along with Joe Reinhardt and Jim Peterson. I'm Ed Golly, reminding you, if the story seems a little too implausible to be true, don't believe it just because somebody wrote it down. Make them prove it.
To learn more about
Yes.
Atheists of Florida,
Okay.
visit our website at atheistofflorida.com. Continue the discussion on our website, talk.aof.ngo. And join us again next Friday for another edition of the Atheist Forum here on 10 Talk 1440.